and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another exciting episode of Let's Talk Comics. I am your host, Jim Biscardi, and this is the show where we go one-on-one with your favorite creators in the business to find out why they love comics, why they broke into comics, how they broke into comics, what they're working on now, what they see the future of the business looking like, and so much more. Thank you, everyone who has supported the show, who have sent comments on any of the social media networks, who have left comments. If you leave a comment, a 5-star comment on iTunes or Spotify, and I read it at the very end of the episode, I will send you a sticker and probably some other freebies. Who knows? It really means the world to me. If you have not yet, or here's what you should do. If you're listening to us right now, take a screenshot of whatever your listening platform is, Spotify, iTunes, whatever, and send it to me on social media. If you're on social media, tag me in a tweet, post it on Instagram in a story, tag me, I will reshare it. Because selfishly, it helps me get the word out about the show. And you love the show, I love the show. Don't we want more people to love the show? All right. Now, my guest today is someone whose work I've admired for a really long time and is a relatively new voice in this business. He honestly is probably one of the most exciting, true comic book creators that the business has seen in a while. He is Juni. Juni is a writer. He is an artist. He is a storyteller, and he's got books out. Degelia and Monkey Meat that he did at Image. Degelia he did elsewhere. He just came off a run on a DC Black Label book, The Boy Wonder, where he did Robin, which I think really kind of catapulted him into the next level of just fan awareness. His distinct visual style, deeply personal storytelling, and fresh takes on mythology, adventure, and identity have really, I believe, made him a standout voice in the business. Look, from the indie comics to the world of superheroes, he's really carved a path, blending a whole bunch of different influences, things from manga and animation and European comics and folklore into something entirely of his own. So today, obviously, we do our walk down memory lane. We're going to explore his journey. It's so interesting because his first influences, as you'll hear, were not American comics. And so how one gets introduced to the medium and fall in love with it in a completely different way is really, really interesting. We're going to talk about how he developed his artistic voice and the creative process kind of behind it. So that's it. That's all. You're going to love this episode because I loved doing it. So without further ado, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's talk comics. Juni, welcome.
Hi.
Juni, I've been a fan of yours for a while. And so I am actually really excited for our chat today. Your work has a sense of kineticism, and it's so unique and just so gorgeous in a number of different ways that in order for us to kind of kick this off a little bit, and I know you've spoken about it a little bit, but I want to dive into how you kind of got immersed into comics and kind of the art form a bit, because you've said, a lot of what you've done is self-taught, but also too, right, a lot of your early influences are not the traditional, American superhero stuff, just as a nature of you being, Senegalese and being born there. And so can you talk a little bit about, some your early exposure to the form and what that was like for you? Because I think for a lot of folks like myself growing up with with American comics and whatever, that we had a lot. It was pervasive in the culture in a sense. And so was that the case for you growing up?
No. Oh, no. Well, I guess yes and no. The French side of things, because like I grew up in Senegal, so
Mm,
the most people don't read comics, and
right,
there isn't a comic book industry there. Oh well,
right.
it's very 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 early start now. But on the French side of things, so on my mom's side and kind of my dad, because like basically the comics you would have to buy in Senegal for the longest time would be mostly French ones.
Right.
So my dad and his generation grew up on Tintin and like other kids comics from Belgium and France. Some Marvel, because like I discovered a few years ago that my aunt used to read Silver Surfer and Thor,
Oh, nice.
which was a bit of a mind blown for me. But anyway, but that was when she was a kid. When I was a kid, Marvel comics were not really they were nowhere to be found.
Right.
You had some French ones, some manga, but even the manga ones were like there was one spinning rack, and it was
Okay.
like random manga of big shonen series. Uh,
Okay.
anyway, so it wasn't really around. I grew up surrounded by people who didn't really know what I was into or how to guide me.
Hmm.
I'm not self-taught. I did manage to go to art school.
Okay.
That was mostly thanks to my dad and the European Union giving us a grant to like help me study. And coming to France was like, okay, so now I get to actually I get to walk into a comic shop.
Right.
The way that I used to do when I was a kid, almost every summer when we went to Europe, we had a list of like this is all the stuff that I saw on the internet that over the year that I know exists, and if I'm lucky, I can find it. And that applied to
Okay.
like, comics, books, games, movies, whatever. So we had a list of our summer haul, you could say, and we had a budget, so we had to figure out what we could take or not. Anyway, um, so yeah, the a lot of what I grew up on was a mix of the French comics
Hmm.
that I think pretty much every Franco-Belgian kid would know,
Okay.
and there was a Disney magazine which had French comics in it that I
Hmm.
read until I was maybe 17. So a lot of the comics that I know came from there. Um, and then when I was around, I had read some American stuff. I mostly knew the superheroes and the American
Right.
side of things from the cartoons and the movies. I
Yeah.
had read some comics that I managed to get my hands on, like Humberto Ramos's Spider-Man. When I
Okay.
was 11, he was a French friend that I just made. He just arrived from France, and he had a copy of the hardcover of it. So that was my first actual Spider-Man comic.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and then yeah, then I started. Back when the internet was a lot more free. Uh,
Hmm.
I found websites that had like you could like torrent some stuff.
Right.
We make the joke, especially among Africans, of like piracy is like 90% of how we create our culture because locally you don't always have everything.
Right.
But anyway,
Well,
so
so I want to go
yeah,
back just a tiny bit in that you mentioned that like your parents didn't necessarily like know what like or what you were into, right? How did you I guess in that case, how did you discover some of the things that you inevitably were into, right? Like was it just being able to get your hands on some of this, some of this other early stuff and being like, oh, I like that. But like, was there, you mentioned obviously being able to get to art school. Was that kind of always the goal and the plan for you
oh yeah,
early on, or was there potentially something else that you maybe would have done, but then went in this direction?
oh yeah, no, like I was 11 or 10 when I said I wanted to draw.
Okay,
And I was lucky because my dad essentially said yes as long as you're good at it. Um,
sure,
which is like even then kind of puts the pressure on you. Like to this day, the Instagram discussion group I have with my siblings
right.
is mostly jokes about parental pressure. Uh, anyway, so yeah, no, the plan was always I want to draw, not
Mhm.
necessarily comics, but comics was the first thing that I started working on when I was a kid.
Hmm.
And everything I discovered was mostly through TV or the internet,
Okay.
or walking into the one bookstore that we had in town and just spending a concerning amount of time just looking at different comics, being like, okay, I have 5,000 francs, which one do I buy? And
Sure.
just like flipping through different books, making different piles, to the point where like they knew me after a while. Like they knew like this is the weird kid who just walks in and then he spends 2 hours next to the manga spinning rack, just like looking at different things.
Right.
So yeah.
I love that. So then, in so I'd love to hear a little bit more about like that first comic shop experience for you. So you know you get to France and you're walking into a comic shop. Like what is because I can only assume that is just like so much noise, but also like glowing white light. Like here is all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Is it was it overwhelming at all?
Well, not really, because like
Okay,
um because I used to come to France almost every summer, I had
sure.
seen one or two special shops, specialty shops. Most of
Hmm.
the time, we didn't really necessarily go to those, but like video game shops, like in Paris,
Right.
there's a street where there's only comic video game stores.
Okay.
So I had like reference for it, but then I moved here uh, for my studies specifically initially, and then I went to a comic book shop that I still go to. I'm actually friends with the people who run it now.
Nice.
Uh, and yeah, the first time that I went there, I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I point to a poster of Hellboy, which I ended up buying a few years after. And I just say, "Oh, that's Hellboy. Like, that's one of those comics that I discovered when I was 17 when I started looking into American comics."
Hmm.
And I because I discovered all this stuff in writing, I mispronounced the name of Mike Mignola for like years, and I didn't know. So I said, "Yeah, that's the Mike." I said Mignola, and the guy who ran the store just like stopped. He came to me. He looked at me like straight in the eye, and he was like, "It's Mignola." And he just kept walking. It was like anyway. So that gives you the tone, I guess.
Sure. Okay. So you end up doing studies at art school. Is the goal always comics, or is it different forms of art? And what would you say maybe you took from your time there that then got you to hit the ground running on becoming the artist you are now?
I would say it was always comics. Well, it was illustration as a whole,
Okay,
but my proclivities were always really towards comics.
sure.
Um, yeah.
Because there's to me in there's always such a phenomenal sense of design in a lot of the books that you do that and so I was always curious. I wanted to ask if they like graphic design as opposed to the just kind of your normal sequential storytelling is if that was something that you found yourself drawn to a little bit
I
more
guess.
than others.
Well, we did have classes for graphic design,
Sure.
but I don't know. Like it's just something that I feel I'm starting to lose is that I've been working in specifically on comics like back to back for like four
Yep.
years to the point where before I met Jelia, I used to spend more time just making illustrations for the hell of it and like
Hmm.
having fun with like compositions and stuff. I don't do that anymore.
Okay.
Mostly because I haven't taken the time to do it. Because I'm always like, if I'm not actively making comic book pages, I'm researching stuff for the comic book pages that I'm going to make. And so the purely illustration part of what I enjoy about drawing has kind of like fallen to the wayside. So I decided
Hmm.
to, now that Monkey Meat is over, I want to spend more time just going back to illustrations. And I don't know, like I get interested in graphic design and architecture and stuff like that. Like every book almost, I always end up learning a whole bunch of stuff about a whole bunch of subjects that
Hmm.
I don't know. It's like there's a suspicion that I might be autistic, and there's the term special interest. That's been how I've worked my whole life,
Sure.
and that's sort of how it functions. So every time you
Okay.
see design or stuff like that in the way that I do things, it's mostly because I probably have been, I don't know, I was obsessed with something for like 2 months, and then
Sure.
yeah, anyway.
What does research look like for you then when you are researching a project? I mean, obviously you said you dive really into like architecture and things like that, but for any of your books in particular, is some of the research, is it story focused? Is it more art focused for you when you're putting together some of that stuff?
It depends really. I think it depends on what the initial drive was. A
Okay.
lot of the time, it tends to be I'm interested in a subject,
Yep.
and I'm interested enough that I want to make a story about it.
Mhm.
And then my brain, I need to feed it, I guess. So it's a lot of like, I need to read books, I need to find articles and studies. And so, to give you a concrete example, I had a discussion with a friend a few weeks ago about Colonial Hunters because she was playing the Avatar game, the James Bond
Okay.
one.
Yep.
And we were just making jokes about like colonialism and in media and whatever, and the colonial hunters, like the figure of. So I started looking, okay, where can I find books about or by colonial hunters, and I found
Mm.
some, especially one from written by Samuel Baker, who was in the 1800s. He was a friend of the king and not the best guy in the world, but you read the thing and it's full of everything you'd expect from a guy of that time. Except I'm looking at his wiki page because my brain then dives into, okay, who wrote this book? Because now I want to know who this guy is. The wiki page says that he was an abolitionist, and I'm like, that doesn't track with the way you talk about black people. Like I have questions, so I then start researching the complete like um, historical context of Uganda at the time, and like you see how you move from one thing to the next, and
Yeah.
very often you start with a drive, which for me was I want to do a story about colonial hunters. And gradually, I start thinking about legacy and how this guy had the power of the British media system behind him, which allowed him to publish books, which allowed him
Hmm.
to change the way that he was perceived, compared to the way that the Ugandan king who fought against him was perceived. And the Ugandan king himself wasn't necessarily such a great guy either. Like, there's a lot of.
Sure. And so that's just that. So you may immediately just kind of go down the rabbit hole,
Yeah.
absorb it all in, and then it just
Yeah,
comes back out
usually,
in.
yeah, usually like the more you learn about this stuff, the more you have like ideas of subjects you want to tackle or angles you can take. And
Yep.
even sometimes you start wanting to talk about something, and then at the end, the story you make is about something completely different
Hmm.
because you discovered so much more than what you thought you would find. I was looking into Haitian zombies. Initially, I had an idea about Haitian zombies, and now it transformed into talking about losing your culture through the flattening effects of globalism.
Huh. Like that's like I like that to me is fascinating, right? Like I think that's where a lot of folks are, what hits them as far as ideas and topics and themes and things like that is truly different for everyone, and I love hearing the process for you. Okay, so then let's talk a bit about, so now you finish school, you're finishing schooling, and you have to figure out, how do I break into the business, how do I get something published.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, with you being in Europe, is is the hunt then for you to try and like get published first by a European publisher? Are you immediately trying to get something done here in the States? Like, where did you begin to even think, all right, where do I go and here's how I do it to try and get something made?
Well, I did try to get Delia published in France. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Most publishers told me that they didn't really see how they could sell it.
Okay.
Uh, One was interested, but it didn't pan out. We had a bit of a disagreement, I guess.
Okay.
They're not the bad, like he's not a bad guy or anything. It's just,
Sure.
it just
It
didn't work.
just wasn't a fit.
Yeah, exactly. And because of the difficulty of figuring out a place for that book, I ended up following my uncle's advice, which was pitch it in the US.
Mhm.
At the time, it was maybe a year before Black Panther came out.
Okay.
So the mindset was this is a place that has like not perfect or anything, but at least they're a bit more attuned to this kind of stuff than France would be. So that's what I did, and yeah, I found TKO pretty quickly.
Hmm.
The deal went through, and then around the same time, basically when I graduated, I joined Kugali, which at the time was just a Facebook page. Then they
Okay.
became a Nigerian company with like a bunch of artists from around Africa, and then they went into animation and they made a TV show with Disney and stuff. At the time, it was just a Facebook page, and
Hmm.
we started making like printing our own comics together. And they went to conventions, peddled the thing around. I shared my stuff on the internet. So around the time that I signed Gilia, I had also made enough of a footprint, I guess, that I started receiving offers from DC, Boom, Image for like covers and short stories and stuff like that. And then
Hmm.
the ball just starts rolling, and you get more and more interest in what you do.
Right.
And so far, it's been pretty great. Like I don't think I've had to like actively look for work for 4 or 5 years. It's been nice.
Sure. So as those offers start coming in for you, right? Like what are some of your initial reaction to some of that stuff? Like is it like is it like, oh, great, like obviously this is awesome, work is coming in, I'm going to get to do some cool stuff. But for you, obviously with some of your initial stuff being, obviously the creator owned stuff first, uh did you always want to do some of the superhero stuff and things like that, or like was that a goal, or did you see it more as I'm going to take on this work to get myself some more exposure and a footprint with published stuff, and then
Hmm.
go wild?
I think I was more starry eyed at the time than I am now. Like it was never the goal. I never imagined that that would be the thing that I would be doing.
Right.
And even now, like, even when I started receiving the first few offers, I make the joke when I tell people that like I worked for with DC. I make the joke that the first time they pitched me on something, I said no because I wasn't interested. My very first time receiving an email from DC Comics,
Right.
and I pitched what ended up becoming my first story, which was Truth and Justice.
Right.
Well, no, actually, I pitched Boy Wonder at the time.
Hmm.
That was like 2020, I think. And they
Okay.
told me, we can't give you that yet because like you just arrived, but would you like to do Truth and Justice? Andrew Aydin was the writer on it. So I said, okay. And then, ball rolls. A few years later, you get to do the thing you actually wanted to do. But I think that's a pretty good example because the best work that I do tends to be the one that I have a physical or emotional need to do.
Right.
Boy Wonder is a personal story disguised as a Batman book. My first TMNT story, the annual for 2022, I think, was
Yep.
also a personal story that just happens to be using the turtles to do it. Uh,
Hmm.
so I tend to prefer that rather than
Sure.
we have a slot for a book. Would you want to take care of it? I've done that. I'm not such a big fan of it. uh, I figured I should.
Can you talk about what some of the biggest differences are there then, right? In that, in not that something that you're not the biggest fan of, but just do, does your mind how does your mindset have to change in obviously like telling a story you want to tell using these characters versus,
Yeah,
hey, here's a story we need to tell, do you want to do it?
yeah. So I think the difference for me is that when the stuff just comes naturally from myself, it's because, like I said, like there's something that needs to come out.
Right.
And when I'm approached, essentially being told, we are making this book, it's going to exist regardless because the schedule says that it has to exist. Would you
Right.
want to be on it? then I have to go the opposite way of, okay, so I need to find something to fill that void. Whereas when I'm coming up with a personal story and then I figured, hey, this could be good for this character that already exists, I'm taking something out of myself. Working on something that was initiated by someone else, it's kind of like being forced to initiate something out of thin air when you don't actually have any juice to get out of the fruit, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you do, and sometimes it's quite difficult. And you also have other issues that come more from the whole work for hire type thing of like working for a corporation where you have certain limitations to what you can do. I was lucky on Boy Wonder. I didn't have many limitations. Like, I think the biggest one was stay as close as you can to like what the characters are usually conceived to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not every book is
So
like that.
so when you're doing a book like Boy Wonder, what kind of like, is there much homework you have to do to bone up on some of those characters in a sense, and what are you what are you gravitating towards in that sense, just to make sure that you're kind of staying in that area?
So I figured I should stick to like the general idea of the characters. I didn't need to the nitty gritty of every one of them. I even found it funny because like I saw a few tweets around the time it was coming out where people were like comparing pages from Boy Wonder to like pages from other stories with that same character were like published in like 40 years ago.
Okay.
And then like, oh, this is a reference to this, and I'm like, I didn't even know that existed. This is purely a coincidence. It just so happens that like this character just fits with this type of iconography or situation.
Right.
Like there's a reason why certain things tend to come back for certain characters. No, the idea was you read the big ones for those characters, sort of get an idea of like for the ones that you don't really know. And otherwise, like you already have an idea of what you want to do with them. A lot of their characterizations is based on, I want to say, vibes and osmosis. It's like,
Sure.
so Jason is the one who ended up hurt and everything. Like he's mostly known for this. Dick Grayson is mostly known for this. And my goal is I want to do a story about a kid who goes through these different steps, and I can use this character to help him get to that step, this character to help him get to that step, and then I tweak whatever I need to tweak, like making Jason Todd a lot more physically and mentally traumatized than he usually is, because I really wanted to like hammer home the idea of joining this family independently of like Batman and everything, just joining this family with this strict of a code and this rough of a life. Someone who falls by the wayside falls hard. And the dynamic between the new kid who thinks he's getting the short hand of the stick compared to the older brother who's like, yeah, well, I live in a dump and I can't really sleep, and you know.
Okay. No, I love that. And so, okay. So Boy Wonder feels like a big kind of coming out moment for you, in a sense where it's a lot of folks now, I feel like, saw the stuff that you were doing on that book and then immediately kind of wanted to go and see some of the other work that you've done and some of your older work. As you begin to pick up an audience like that, what does that feel like for you, as far as, do you let that exposure and the fans coming to kind of your work, how does that help maybe dictate some of what you think your next moves may be, or so, as far as like next projects and things like that you want to work on?
Well, I decided to cut down on work, so I also decided that I needed to do more creator-owned stuff.
Sure.
Or rather, like, stick to it as much as I can. Like, I really do treat the work for hire stuff more like a bonus, I guess. It's sort of the
Okay.
paying the bills type of part of the job.
Right.
That said, I do have some criteria, I guess. I'm financially stable enough that I can refuse a work if it comes to me and I don't like it.
Yep.
And I want to exercise that freedom as much as I can. But
Hmm.
we live in a sausage, and sometimes you can't always say no because you have bills to pay and a cat to feed. Uh,
Sure.
but anyway, so when I can, anyway, I try to focus on stories that when they are sent to me of like this writer wrote a story about this character, and if I think the story is good, like
Yep.
I don't know, has a theme that I find interesting or whatever, I want to do it.
Hmm.
But it is a job more so than it is when I'm making Monkey Meat or Mobilis or Gelia or whatever else, where
Hmm.
it's literally like me needing to put something out.
Right.
And I don't know, like when one of my personal creations makes me a billionaire or whatever, if that ever happens, which I doubt, then I will be able to not worry so much about the
And just do
financial
whatever.
side of things. But until then, so yeah,
Okay.
it's mostly it's the most job part of the job, is how I'm gonna say it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So I think I had at one point heard an interview that you had done where uh, you usually have two or three projects kind of in motion at some point when you're doing it. Now obviously you said like you're trying to cut back on some stuff so
Yeah.
you can just give yourself some breathing room. How does managing all, like, how do you manage like all of that stuff? Like how do you go kind of jump from project to project in motion and kind of keep all of that just in sync?
I don't know. Uh, I genuinely, I'm sure there's some kind of method somewhere in there, but there's a lot of like,
Sure.
it's kind of an addiction.
Yeah.
So the motivation comes from the need to get the stuff out. Um, Last year, I worked on. Okay, when did I finish? I think I finished Boy Wonder in 2023.
Okay.
So last year I worked on the Earl King and then Monkey Meat back to back, and I essentially went Boy Wonder, Earl King, Monkey Meat back to back.
Hmm.
Each volume would be around 150 pages each, and when I'm working on one book, I'm also writing the others. So there's a lot of whenever an idea comes, I write it down and I add it to the notebook or whatever of the given project, and then the
Hmm.
thing forms itself while I'm working on the pages of the other one. And I don't know, it's all very holistic, I guess. There's no
Sure.
real method or strategy. Um, yeah, it would be interesting to see how that actually works from the outside.
So then for you now, becoming a more established creator, in the industry, have you found yourself like surrounded by a bit of a community in a sense? Like, how um, do you like? Is there a circle that you are, talking about just creative ideas and bouncing ideas and stuff off of with?
Oh yeah, yeah. So you mean peers? Yes.
Yeah, yeah, peers, 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's a few. Uh, and it's weird. Well, not weird, but like I was in Angoulême last weekend, so like
Okay.
the
Yep.
French Comic Book Festival, and there's this weird moment of like, oh yeah, like I'm interacting with these people in a friendly, what's the word?
It's like professional, but also a little bit beyond because you kind of
Yeah,
these are
and like
people who.
and even like outside, like the reason I work with Aditya Bidikar so much is because like we are friends at this point, and we have phone calls as frequently as we can.
Sure.
I talk to Haas pretty much every day,
Right.
and every so often I have a discussion about like the state of the world or the state of comics with Dennis Camp.
Okay.
So
Yep.
there's a bunch of people like that, and there's local French people as well. It's I live in a cave. I interact physically with no comics people,
Sure.
and I kind of like it that way.
Uh-huh.
But it's nice to have like people outside that I can reach to. Like even today, I had like questions about a Monkey Meat story that I thought I should probably change. Um, and I texted two or three people in the comic book business and outside to get different ideas of like, do you think I should? So it's nice. It's really cool to have. It's surreal as well, you know.
Right.
You read their books and then suddenly you're across the table from them, or you're on a call and you're talking about your private lives and stuff. Like, it's weird.
Right. So who out there doing work today makes you say to yourself, oh crap, I need to up my game?
So, okay. Well, so she's a French creator. Her name is Léa Muraviec.
Okay.
I discovered her work not last year, actually, 2023. Yeah. I think her book in English is called The Great Beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of blew my mind. So, and we ended up meeting, and I asked like, would you want to do a cover for Boy Wonder #5? So the variant cover of Boy Wonder #5, that's her. And I don't know, like, she has a very surreal way of doing things, like very cartoony but very effective.
Sure.
And because my eye tends to like art that's very streamlined and very shape focused, I knew I would like it, and then I read the book and I was just like there's ideas of how to put a page together, and I'm just like, you're not a human being. And then there's Bilkis, who is also not a human being. I've seen her original pages, and this is terrifying. I don't know how she does it. She explained it, but it doesn't make sense how a human hand can produce something so like precise and like it's yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love that. All right, so I want to talk about your process and in storytelling a little bit. You know, a lot of the majority of stuff that you have done, you are the writer and the artist, and it's interesting because I was just listening to a chat that that Rob Liefeld and Robert Kirkman were having on Rob's podcast about how there are. How some of the folks who are doing some of the best work are the writer and the artist. So for you in when you do that, where is, once you break the story down in a sense for you, where does the process start? Is it visuals? Is it script? Is it something else? Like, how do you begin to put the building blocks together for some of the books that you've done?
It's kind of both.
Sure.
I guess usually I'd start with like notes and scribbles. Okay. Because sometimes there's ideas that only work because they're an image. If you were to describe them, like write them down, they wouldn't work the same way. Like they wouldn't convey. Like even for myself, if I want to understand why an idea that I had 3 weeks ago made sense, I need to see it in an image. So I usually tend to like make a scribble of it because I know that in 3 weeks, if I just write down the words describing it, it's not going to make sense anymore. So yeah, it's kind of a mix of both. And then I have like text files where I just write down things step by step, like for a story. Of like step 1, this happens, and then this happens. Very often it's kind of like panels. Telling me in this panel this is what happens. There's very often little description or like an idea of the composition or whatever, and then when when inspiration strikes, I open the notebook and I start doing iterations of different ways to make that visual.
Okay. So then, do you always have the story length in your head kind of predetermined in a sense, or do you work a bit more where let's get started and see where it takes us?
I usually have an idea.
Okay.
Especially like on Monkey Meat, it was one of the rules that I put for myself. Like there's 2 stories per issue. Every story is 10 and then 15 pages.
Okay.
And that was my sort of like self pressure of like, can you make your stories fit in a smaller format? It forces you to sort of like stick to big bullet points of what you want to get at. And every story idea that I had, I could sort of get a sense of, okay, this would fit in 10, this would fit in 15, this would not fit, we need to change something or keep it for something else.
Hmm.
So yeah, usually I sort of have an idea.
Okay, I love that. Let's talk about Monkey Meat then for a little bit. In that, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a project that you've been working on for a while, and then obviously you get the first volume comes out being published by Image. And can you talk a little bit about the process of getting the book in and through Image, and then beginning to start working on it, because all your other stuff up until this point had been kind of elsewhere, whether it's TKO
Yep.
or whatever. Was Image the place you wanted to get something out, or was it a little bit more just happenstance?
Kind of both.
Sure.
Because like, okay, so um, I try to have books in different publishers,
Right.
and Monkey Meat is a different beast from the others. In that, from the get go, I said Monkey Meat is not made for making money. Uh, like it doesn't. It's not an easy like commercial pitch or anything. It's a
Right.
really weird thing, I guess. And I've been lucky because so far it's been profitable. Like it's been profitable every year since it came out. The rule I gave myself was, as long as you're not losing money, this is, at least financially speaking, worth doing. You don't need to
Mhm.
earn huge amounts, but as long as you're not losing anything. Um, so the idea was, beyond that, I don't want to find myself having to struggle for rights and stuff like that with the publisher on something like Monkey Meat, which is so decidedly anti all this stuff.
Right.
Uh, I want to have full control over what happens to it and stuff. Like, anyway, so Image was the best place for it.
Hmm.
It's not the first place that I pitched it, but the place that I pitched it as is connected to Image, and they were the ones who said we don't see the commercial potential or something like that. And I was
Sure.
like, great, so that means that I'm doing this right. Uh, so yeah, like I figure maybe for Image it was a case of like, yeah, sure, why not? Like this sounds
Mhm.
weird, but whatever. We are full of weird things over there. Um, and yeah, like it worked out pretty well. At
Sure.
least
So you would say that Monkey Meat, for you, is decidedly weird, and that is part of the allure for you in wanting to do it.
yeah, like I described it as an outlet for myself. It
Sure.
it became even more evident with the second batch, because like the first batch was a collection of like ideas that were kind of like separate from each other, and I figured out a way to make them all in the same universe, but like they're not very connected and stuff.
Hmm.
This new batch is a lot more like purposeful in its format, its aesthetic, in the stories that I choose to tell with it. I don't know how much of it you've read, but like there's a through line, I guess,
Hmm.
of like presenting it as a magazine that someone would buy to learn about the Monkey Meat Island as like a promotional piece of media. And then
Right.
the stories are all related to like, again, this whole thing of special interests of like every story is about something that I was obsessed with at some point.
Okay.
I needed to make a story about it because I needed to get it out of my system and have sort of a justification for why I'm reading so much about it. So yeah, the second batch is a lot more like organized, I guess.
Hmm.
Uh,
So I guess then, but what did you learn then in doing the first batch that made the second batch feel a bit more contained, right? So like you mentioned that it's a bunch of different it was a bunch of different ideas kind of thrown together, but what would you say that you feel were the things that really worked about the first batch that you wanted to refine and really make work for the second, outside of
yeah,
the more linear story?
yeah. So the a big piece of feedback that I got was the whole disparate, is that the word? Uh,
Mm.
Vibe of it.
Right.
And I thought, okay, so I'm not going to make it more normal. uh, but
Right.
I do want people to sort of get a really clear idea of what they have in their head, a clearer idea, I guess, of what they have in their hands. Hence the idea of like making it, the summer magazine, and
Hmm.
then there was also how much time it takes, what are the parts that I enjoy making, um, and which direction can I take this aesthetically, like thematically, which is also why like I really wanted to have fun, just sort of giving it the same vibe as like something you would have picked off the sidewalk, I guess,
Mm.
like underground type of comics where,
Right. It definitely has like a zine feel
yeah, basically.
to it.
That was sort of the idea of like this is the place where I get to do the weird stuff that I can't necessarily fit in other things that I work on.
Hmm.
And I get to just have fun and make comics for the fun of making it. Uh, and I get to try out some aesthetic things. I decided to make this one a lot more monochromatic on the comic book pages,
Yeah.
and keep the really like bright, full-on colors for the commercials and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah. I love the like the commercials and the like I said, like really a lot of the like more print ad design work stuff that you do here, because I really feel like it breaks the story up in a nice way that makes the world feel really lived in.
yeah,
And so I'd love to hear a bit more just about like what the actual world building of this for you, because now it's less, like you said, disparate ideas, and you're beginning to like build the world. So what are some of the core things that you've built in this world? I guess, like, what are some of the rules that you've kind of built here?
oh, so I'm still making them. I had a discussion with a friend who told me that one of the parts he enjoys the most is that there isn't a rigid structure to Monkey Meat. There
Right.
is no map of the island, for example. You don't really have
Sure.
an idea of what the place is like. And part of it is I really wanted to keep the flexibility of being able to do anything I want geographically. And I want to keep the sort of fabled vibe of it. Like, you don't really have an idea of the place. It's sort of a place in your imagination where you get to have stories happen and they're about something.
Hmm.
Hence the fable type vibe of it, except in a more sci-fi fantasy type setting. Um, yeah,
Okay.
the idea basically was I want a place that's extremely flexible, where I can use any themes or aesthetics that I want to tackle whichever subjects I'm interested in,
Hmm.
and try aesthetic like experimentations on my pages.
Sure.
Um, and the more I work on it, the more I'm like, I want to make this more and more West African as I go. So
Mm.
even right now, I've started making notes for stories for a third batch. That one is mostly based on especially West African perspectives,
Hmm.
and the relationship of being outside of the West and its globalism and everything, but being the source of the West's wealth. Damn, that was weird. But yeah, basically you're on the sideline, but the resources that make the world work come from you, and
Hmm.
you don't get much of that. Uh, you don't get much dividend, I guess, from that.
Yeah. What are some of the aesthetics that you were excited to kind of portray in the second batch?
Colonial ones, especially.
Sure.
There's something because like the last few years, especially, have really laid bare how imperialism hasn't gone anywhere,
Sure.
and colonial, um, especially like violence in how colonialism is done, has become extremely evident. there was this I think it was a tweet, maybe, I don't know, so just someone who said like the difference between the 1800s and now is that back then they didn't have phones to show us what was happening to them. It's a lot of the same principles, it's a lot of the same techniques, a lot of the same excuses as well. And so basically the idea was, we're going to use the aesthetics of the past to talk about the things of now, because it's exactly the same, except we're going to use that old, clean, warm colors, very like exotic feel of those old colonial posters and commercials. And like one of my favorites, I wish I had the original that I could have in my home, because I love it so much, because it's horribly, there's a horrible like dark humor to it, because it's a recruiting poster for the army, the French army, telling you, join the colonial forces. Essentially, you're going to have a great life over there in Africa, and everyone's going to be really nice to you, and you're going to learn a lot of things, and you're going to come back with a better situations, better money, better status. And you're reading this in the 21st century, and you know everything that like we've learned since then.
Right.
And you have the perspective that the French guy who sees this, he's 17 maybe, he doesn't know yet. And he's going to do and have things done to him that like, anyway, to me that's interesting, I guess, using
Sure.
those old aesthetics and trying to like parody them in a way that doesn't make light of the suffering, but also shows the absurdity of the repetition of it through time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So in doing, as you continue work and things like that, who would you say then are some of your, I guess, some of your biggest artistic influences in a sense? Who do you feel, as you absorb and drink in, other folks' work, has probably the biggest and more profound effect on the stuff that you're doing?
The last one that I started reading was Chinua Achebe, which is really a fault on my part. I should have read his stuff a long time ago. He's kind of like one of the basics in terms of like African literature.
Sure.
But I love how he made a world out of the Nigeria that he represents in his books, especially because his the way that he does it is all setting it all in the same village or in the members of the same lineage and family. And so you get to see the evolution of Nigeria over time. And the way that he does it is so great to me, because there's the media we have now, especially in the West, tends to be very on the extreme side of things. Like the characters are always either really bad or really good, and there's a push to sort of like try to make things extremely clear cut. And I like that he makes stories where it isn't clear cut, and you get good and bad people and nuances for everyone, and the situations that he presents are also nuanced. So I try to pull from that a lot more. Although on Monkey Meat especially, like I'm doing kind of the satirical, cartoony type of things. So you heighten certain things more than Achebe would. But yeah, I'm trying to like get some of that a bit more. I think a good example would be in issue 4. The first story has like a Senegalese family living in a well, not living, but like they rented a place. And to me, it all comes from the contrast between them and the person who actually lives there, who's like, anyway, and talking about, especially using a middle-class Senegalese family to talk about the relationship between, the relationship to ownership, I guess.
Okay. What about on the artistic side of things? Who would you say, influences your style as far as your art goes?
Let's see. So, Ron Wimberly has been an influence since I think I was in art school when I first discovered his work. Maybe even before. I can't remember exactly when it was. But yeah, he's a big one. I have, I think, every issue of his magazine Lab, which I tend to come back to regularly. Even just like flip through the pages and look at the formats and read an article or two or whatever. Like he's a bit spooky in how clever he is. Especially listening to him talk, like having a discussion with him is humbling. Like you can sense the thoughtfulness and the gears running in his brain is kind of impressive.
Okay, nice, awesome. So to kind of wrap this up again, because I appreciate the time today, is as folks pick up Monkey Meat, the second batch, and they should 100% pick up the first batch. What are you hoping fans kind of take from it? As they are reading the second batch, what is you're hoping really resonates with them?
It's funny, I haven't really thought about that.
I mean, look, this is a project that you felt like this is it's a personal project for you in a sense that this is something that you want to put out, and you're putting out because it is something that you want to put out. But obviously, it's going to an audience is going to come to it, and they're gonna pick it up and read it. So I guess like what's the hope that they take from
I'm gonna make a parallel to a music group from the other side of my heritage, the French side, called Cassav. And I saw someone once describe their music from the Caribbean as type of music that like entertains you. You have fun with it. You enjoy yourself. But once the song is over, you're like, oh, like there was actually like something in there. Like there was a nugget of like something to think about, I guess. Just not necessarily mind-blowing or anything, but like just something to keep in mind to reassess a bit of how you interact with the world around you, or certain things that you take for granted and you don't necessarily think about how they work beyond the veneer. And I guess that would be the type of takeaway that I would want people to have. I want them to like come for the enjoyment of the fun of reading the pages and the pretty colors, and essentially like just be entertained and have fun with the book. And if they have maybe even just a handful of stories in there where they're like, oh, like that's something that I probably should think about a bit more when I think about whichever subject, that'd be nice.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Last question for you, and it's something that I do at the end of all these episodes. Obviously, this is a show that is designed and geared to get folks to either check out new works that's maybe not on their radar or whatever. But what is your go-to recommendation for someone who is either looking for something new to read, or maybe hasn't read comics before, and but that if they read this, they will love it?
I don't know if Spirou has been translated in English.
Okay.
But that would be my recommendation. Like we're talking like pure classic Franco-Belgian comics, like especially the old stuff from Franquin, Tom and Juni. Like there's a lot of like old, really fun. It's kind of like the quintessential comics to me, in the pure like European style. To me, it's somewhere between Spirou and Corto Maltese. So yeah, one of those two, I guess. Okay.
Nice. I love it. Well, Juni, thank you so much for taking the time today. Monkey Meat hits comic shop. Monkey Meat's second batch hits comic shops everywhere in early March is where we're at this point. So if you're listening to this, you'll make sure you run to your comic shop, tell them I need a copy of this. Look, if you have read Boy Wonder, it needs to be on your pull list, 100%. So, Juni, again, thank you, man. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, there you have it. Another Let's Talk Comics episode in the can. Big thank you to Juni Ba for spending some time with me. He is over in Europe, and so when we recorded this, it was late for him, so I really do appreciate him taking the time to chat about Monkey Meat. Go check it out. Go tell your retailer you want it. And while you're at the store, just pick up another comic. Pick up something that maybe you wouldn't have picked up. Are you reading Jeff Johns' Ghost Machine books? They are phenomenal. Geiger and Redcoat, bunch of great stuff. If you're a Turtles fan, Jason Aaron's doing great stuff over there. And then while you're there, depending on when you listen to this, go pick up Bug Wars. There is such a bevy of great books being put out these days that it really... Try something new. It's one of the best things about comics where if you jump into it, who knows what you may find, and you may find your new favorite artist, you may find your new favorite writer, you may find your new favorite world. That's what we love about it. And then when you're there, tell your retailer, thank you for keeping this business alive and for doing what you do, because without them, we can't do what we do. All right. A little more business and then we'll get out of here. We've got to read a review. We got one in over on Apple from L. Ozymandias with the headline, "Let's Listen." A great listen for comic fans and people who just love stories. Man, I love comments like that, or reviews like that, because I think, folks, one of the best things about this show are some of the stories that get shared, not necessarily unprompted, but you sometimes never know where these are going to go. And that's one of the things I love about doing this. And so thank you again for leaving it. And then if you're listening to it right now, take a screenshot, share it on social media, tag me, tag Let's Talk Comics, tag Image Comics. We'll share it. We love to do that stuff. And it also helps, like I said, support the show. All right. Well, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for listening again. Stay tuned. Look, this show has basically become weekly. Last week, if you're listening to this in real time, you got 2 episodes in 1 week. How fun is that? If you're listening to this months down the road from when this came out, just know that at one point during all this, it was going to go one way, it went another way, and it was a very exciting time. All right. Well, with that, make sure you keep buying and reading comics, because we're going to keep on talking about them. We'll catch you next time.